So, relationship is a spiritual concept. The original principle is in the spiritual world. And then that's reflected here into the material world. So when the living entity comes to the material world, then they are able to, they continue to look for relationships. But unfortunately, because the understanding of how relationships work is not proper, then there will be difficulty. Everyone needs people, everyone needs to have some value in life, some goals, people to share that with, but unfortunately they have difficulty finding how these things will work properly, how relationships will work properly. So basic misunderstanding will be because we might make the mistake that the relationship is about us. So the idea is we exist, and the relationship should mean others dealing with us. But the nature of relationship is that it must go out. We are who we are, and if it goes out to the other person, then naturally they are going to reciprocate by they come out towards us. Does that make sense? So what's happening is people think, I'm the center, it should all come to me. And each one thinks that, so nothing happens. If everyone thinks relationship means I have to make that endeavor to interact with the other person, then you have relationship. Things happen. So instead of worrying about our pleasure and our needs, we worry about others. That's not at the expense of us dealing properly, dealing according to what we need, putting ourselves in situations that we're comfortable in. In other words, there's a situation. Within that situation, you're comfortable. So that's the situation in which you want to interact with others. So that's natural. So one sees that relationships are happening in environments you're comfortable with. In other words, what your values are, in other words, what your goals are, that should be what the other person is also feeling. So there can be a relationship or friendship amongst equals. You can't have a friendship if there's not a common ground. There has to be a common ground of interaction. That way, when you interact on that platform of that's common, then you can work for how the other person will be happy in that environment under those situations, and they can work for yours. Does this make sense? So the difficulty comes is that we're not, we expect the other person has to come forward first. Until that happens, we won't respond. But basically that only works if you're God. It works for God that way because He is everything. Everything's coming from Him. All situations, all kinds of relationships, all experiences, they're all coming from Him. So He could interact on any platform. So depending upon how you interact with Him, He'll respond in that way. So that principle of one, it means seeing how they deal with you, that's fine if you're God. If you're not, then basically it's what you are expecting from the other person. That should be clear because that's what you're drawing. So since people aren't unlimited like the Supreme Lord, they basically need to know what it is you're looking for, what kind of situations, what's the environment of interaction. And basically that's why people, means in the tradition, they ask so many questions. Where are you from? What do you do? What's the family name? All these things, because in the past they would mean something. Right? If your name in England is Coalfield, there's a good chance that somebody in the past worked or owned a coal field. right? You know, your name's Smith, it means somebody was working as a blacksmith. So then you would know what is the social standing, what is that, then you know what's common. Right? That would be the basic thing. They just want to know so that you know what to talk about, how to interact, what is the conversation. Right? So that's the point. You're talking with intellectual, talk about education or different branches of knowledge, you're talking with administrators, then it's power or politics, you're talking with businessmen, it's money and opportunities, you're talking with general people, then it will be according to what is their interest. Right? So unless there's something common, there won't be anything based on to interact with. So the Vedic system is designed that one should know what is common ground. Right? Because otherwise one may find somebody, there's a nice mood you like, so that's in that situation, that mood came up, that interaction, nice. Change the situation, mood changes. Then you don't know who you're dealing with. Right? So one has to have some kind of understanding so that one can get a broader range, right? Because nowadays especially you don't have the different elements that someone from a certain background has certain values. Everything is so mixed, right? So it's not clear. So one must know, one must find out. So, and in doing that, then one must be careful, one must be sensitive, one must see what's there. If one's not careful, one's not sensitive, then how is one going to know what is arranged there? So, if it's men to men, women to women, less of a problem. It's more direct. But if it's man to woman, woman to man, then you have a difference. And so, unless there's a social commonality that you and your life and your background has the same kind of understandings and values as another person, then you don't have to worry so much. A little bit of minimal, you'll figure it out. But in the present day, everyone from everywhere, all social, different ranges of things and experiences, desires are different, then one's going to have to inquire, one's going to have to ask. Unfortunately, just you put men and women together, they always feel nice, they always feel happy. So when they're happy, they figure this is perfect, this will last forever, right? The living entity is eternal by nature, so they think everything's going to be eternal. The living entity is looking for happiness, right? The jiva is ananda, or happiness, and so then they think if there's happiness, everything will work very nicely. So with these two illusions, everything's eternal, everything's happy, you think it's all great. But then the moment changes, things are different. So it's only through proper understanding, through knowledge, through actual understanding of what is appropriate endeavor, then one can properly have a relationship. Now, one may say, well, why do we need relationships? As we mentioned in the beginning, that's the position. The living entity being an energy of the Lord, energy is dependent upon energetic, so it's dependent. So living entity is only satisfied if they're connected with others. And ultimately only satisfied when that connection goes back to the Supreme Lord. Right? Otherwise, one will be dissatisfied. Because even if you have some nice situation now, at some point, the body's temporary. Somebody's going to leave. You're going to go, they're going to go. Then what? Right? Then, next birth, you have to start all over again. Right? So that cannot be satisfying to the living entity. So one has to try to see the relationships in connection with the Lord. The Lord's eternal. We're eternal. Then that relationship, that'll work. It'll satisfy one in this lifetime. But from that interaction, you're connecting yourself to the Lord. Connecting yourself to the Lord, then you go to the spiritual world. Their relationships are eternal. Then you don't have to worry about it. You work that out once there, it's done. You don't have to worry like here. So, now to get anything done, so that's one aspect. Another aspect is anything that comes to you, good or bad, whatever it is, whatever you deserve or whatever you think you don't deserve, right, is going to come to you from another living entity, right? It's not going to just come from nowhere, like a little puff of smoke. You're walking down the road, and then there's a little puff of smoke, and then there's a wall there, and you bump into it. No, it doesn't work like that. Right? There is a whole process that through another living entity, you will get whatever is due to you, good or bad. So in any way, you are connected with other living entities. So the Vedic concept is, in a sense, we might as well, therefore, learn to live with everybody else. Then, because this everybody else is part of this creation, then we might as well learn to live with everybody else in understanding how you and how they connect with this creation. And how this creation is then coming from the Lord. Right? In other words, since you're going to go to so much trouble in relationships, you might as well know everything about it. Right? It's not that much more trouble. Right? Does that make sense? You know, you ask the husband, he's thinking he can't figure out his wife. He's been living together for 20 years, he still doesn't know what's going on. Right? So, can it be that much more difficult? It means that much, difficulty is there. Take a few more steps and understand his connection with God. Right? Does that make sense? Because ultimately, then, yeah. So the idea is, since we have to be with other people, since we have to interact, we might as well learn how relationships work. So then in this basic science, you have three parts. You have the relationship itself. You have what can be gained from that relationship in the way of, whatever it is that one's looking for, and what is the process of interaction. Right? Because relationship means there's an interaction. Right? So knowledge means to understand who you are, who's God, who's this creation. And in this creation means there's all kinds of other living entities. And all kinds of other things. So you have to know. It means you can walk through a door, you can't walk through a wall. Right? You can walk through a window, but generally a window's there to let in the light, but not to walk through. Because if you walk through a window, there's a good chance there's not a hole. The ground is a little bit more distant than you would like. Plus, windows, when they break, you can get cut. Understand? Simple things. So this is the field of action. So in relationship, you have to know the field. Who are you? You want to really know who you are. What do you actually want? If you don't know what you want, no one else will either. You want someone to have a relationship with you. You want them to know how to interact with you. If you don't know who you are, they won't know either. It's simple. You're comfortable with who you are, they're comfortable with you. You're not comfortable with you, they're not comfortable. Quite simple. You know the field, then you know what are your options for interaction. Right? So there's you, there's other living entities, there's the environment that you're in, there's the mood that's there. So this is time, place, and circumstance. Right? Because these things affect relationship. Right? The husband's with the wife at home, They joke a bit, it works. The husband and wife are out at a formal gathering, the joking does not work. Simple. Why? Because the place is different, the time is different. Right? Or it was in the evening, they're together in the house, they're joking and laughing, but now it's the next morning, early morning, now the husband tries to joke and laugh, it doesn't work. Why? Time is different. Circumstances same, right? But time is different, so mood is different. Understand? So action depends upon time, place, and circumstance. So you don't understand that, you won't know what can be gained at this time, and therefore you will not know how to work. Does this make sense? So in anything, okay. The brahmachari comes into the ashram at 7 o'clock at night. He turns on the lights. He opens up this and that, gets out all his plastic bags, rustles around, makes plenty of noise. Nobody cares. The brahmachari comes into the same ashram at 12 o'clock at night, turns on the light, gets out his bags, rustles around. All the other brahmacharis start yelling and screaming. Why? The time is different. The situation is therefore different. So if you're not aware of these things, your relationships will have problems. Because why? You're not aware of the situation. It's science. Right? Not rocket science. It's just science. It's logical. You don't understand. Everybody else in the room is asleep. Right? The lights are out. Why? Because they want to sleep. Right? When you sleep, you like the lights off. So therefore, if you turn the lights on, that's good for you. You can see where your stuff is. But it's bad for everyone else because they can't sleep. Right? Then on top of that, you start opening this and that, making all kinds of noise. Right? Amazingly, they do make plastic bags that don't make much noise. But no, brahmacharis have to have the bags that make the most noise. You just touch them, you know, it sounds like thunder, right? Like that. Why? Because they last a long time. Really good bags, right? So, this is a problem. Right? So, it's inconsiderate. That's why everybody else gets upset. So you can think, well, I can just try to get into bed and try to do this and that, but it won't be so perfect for me. So they should understand. The funny is how, you know, 5 other people have to understand, but you as one person can't understand. They're asleep and they're happy. Right? Does it make sense? So these are where problems come up. Somebody just said, this is what I feel like, so this is what I'm going to do. That's nice, but as we mentioned, the feeling like and what you do are connected. So if what you feel like and what can be done is wrong, you will get a bad result. Then you can't figure out, well, yesterday I did like this, it was fine. Why today it's different? So what's the problem? You think it's the other person. It's nothing to do with the other person. It's yourself. You're unaware of the situation. Right? Does that make sense? So, that's it. Then there is, whatever's the relationship, there are goals of that relationship, things that can be obtained. There's elements that are natural for that relationship. Right? You have friends, the goal is you're going to have fun. You know, you can, you know, do things together, you know, talk together, do whatever you like together. Right? So that works there. You're equals, so it works that way. Right? Sometimes you do what you want to do, sometimes you do what your friends want to do. It's a natural balance. Right? But father, you know, parent and child, that's different. It's not you hang around and go wrestling like that. Okay, if you're 3 years old, maybe. You know, but when you're bigger, it's not like that. It's a different mood. So what can be obtained? They can give knowledge, they can give direction, they can help you out, they can set you up. Right? You can, how you say, you know, ask their advice, you can show your appreciation. These are the things that you can do, that you can accomplish, that will get you the taste or rasa or in that relationship. Right? Conjugal relationship then is different again. right? That would be, that will have the element, all the other elements in it, but you have to know when that element is there. Right? Friendship is there. When you plan, do things together, that's friendship. When one is taking care of the other, either physically or emotionally because of some difficulty or that's parental. Right? If there's that intimacy, that closeness, that's conjugal. Right? Now and again, then there's the element of service, trying to take care, doing those things. Wife is doing things around the house, the husband's out, trying to collect money. These things, so it's service. But you have to know what mood happens when. If you're not aware of the environment, it will fail. It will fail. Now, in this, then we see what can be obtained, or the goal, right? That means based on what can be obtained, there's a process, right? Just like if you want lunch, then there's a process of cooking, right? Not if you want lunch, you go out and fix your tire on your car, right? No, you want to drive, you fix the tire on your car. You want lunch, you cook. You understand? The process is directly connected to the result. Wrong process, wrong result. So if you're getting the wrong result, what does that mean logically? Wrong process, right? How many people want to accept that? No, it's got to be the other person. There's something wrong with the other people. No, we're following the wrong process. Why would we follow the wrong process? We don't understand the relationship, or we don't understand the situation of the relationship. Therefore, we don't understand what goal can be gained. Or we have a false idea of what you do gets what. You know what I'm saying? Like the boys that, the small, younger boys at school, then they think by harassing the girls, throwing things at them and calling them bad names is going to make them, love them. Process doesn't work. You understand? So sometimes we come up with a false idea of what a process should be. Oh, if you put this on, I'll be so cool, everyone will think it's that. You go out and everybody else is wearing the same thing, so it's nothing special, right? Everybody thinks the same. Right? Does that make sense? Okay, now, in this then, the field of activity, in other words, understanding, here we have two things. Sambandha means relationship. Prayojana means goal. Abhideya is process. So now in this we're starting with God and His creation. So God is the masculine principle. He's the existence. He is everything. He is the cause of everything. Then He expands His creation. That's the feminine aspect. Right? Now that has all the opulence, all the experiences, all those different things. The other has the knowledge. So what you're doing is combining the masculine and feminine principles, right? So this can either mean masculine and feminine, mean just which is the active and passive aspect, right? Or, like let's say a hammer and a nail, right? So the nail is the feminine aspect, the hammer is the masculine aspect, right? If the hammer doesn't do something, the nail doesn't do anything either. Right? You can sit around all day and yell and scream with these stupid nails, they don't do anything. I brought all these nails to spend so much money to get these nails to put all these boards together, and nothing's happening. Why? Because there's no hammer interacting. You understand? Right? You and your car. You can sit there and yell and scream at the car why it's not driving down the road, but you're not doing something. Right? So that's the way it is. The parents say, the kids are, yelling and screaming, running around, being crazy, but is the parent doing something about that? We're just letting it happen. You understand? So if there's no interaction between the two principles, there's no result. Right? So generally when we're dealing with things, it's quite easy to understand. Right? You know who you are. You know what the thing is that you're working with. You know the relationship. You know what the thing can do. You know how by dealing with that thing you can get that result you want. Straightforward. Right? Very simple. Generally most people who spend a little time with anything, either by practice, by association, or by education, can become quite good at dealing with things. Right? You have a potato, you have a knife, you have a cutting board. You know the relationship, right? How do you put it? Potato, cutting board, knife? Knife, potato, cutting board, right? You could put the potato cutting knife there, put the potato on top, and then whack the potato with the cutting board. You could do that, right? But why does it work? It works, it's slow, because it's basically the opposite of what it should be. So you got it in line, right? You know, but if I take the potato, put the cutting board, and then whack the cutting board with the knife, probably nothing will happen. Right? So, you know what the cutting board does. It supports. It allows cutting to go on without getting damaged, right? It doesn't damage itself, it doesn't damage the knife. You put the potato in between the knife and the cutting board. You use the sharp side of the knife. You apply some pressure. The potato gets cut, right? You use the back of the knife, you have to apply a little bit more pressure, right? And when you hold the knife, you hold the handle. You don't hold the blade, right? Does that make sense? Like that. So all these things are there. One may say, oh, you know, Vedic is so technical. But it took a few minutes to describe the potato, the board, and the knife, and the relationship, and actually how you work it, right? So that's all the Veda is telling you when you do Achman. It's that simple. It takes you 7 seconds, but it takes up a whole page. So by practice, something difficult becomes very easy. Right? So now you have that, you get that, because your goal is to get a potato that's cut up. So then you have it. So now, if you push harder than the knife needs to be done, right? It means how much you need to cut the potato. If you push less, it won't cut. If you push too much, your knife might get stuck in the board. Right? Does that make sense? So you are careful on how you're dealing with the knife. If it's not cutting, then if the knife is not sharp, you'll sharpen the knife. Right? Does that make sense? Right? If you keep your finger too close and you get cut, was it the knife's fault? Must be the potato's fault. You know? Well, then if it's not the potato, then at least it has to be the cutting board's fault, right? No, it's your fault. Why? Because you're operating it. Right? So all these things seem so elementary, so simple, right? So ordinary. Any idiot knows this, right? Okay, but replace that knife, cutting board, and the potato with a person, and all these same principles that should be applied, we don't. Because a person has feeling, so we go by our feelings, and whatever we feel like, we think that's reality, and that will happen. Does that make sense? This is where the problem comes up. We can deal with dead matter fine, but if the dead matter talks, then we have a problem. But it's the same principle. Who are you? Who's the other person? What's the relationship? So therefore, what's the proper way of dealing? What is the goal of that relationship? So you act in such a way that you get the goal. If you're not getting the goal, it's not their fault, it's your fault. Right? The man is expert at his business. He's so much money. He's expert at driving his car. He's a good, for a hobby. He's a great carpenter. He can make all the furniture in his house. He goes out. He's great at golfing. All these different things he knows. Here's the ball. Here's the little thing like this. You whack it with this iron. It goes down there and falls into the hole. And people go, hardy ball. Right? But he doesn't expect the ball to do it, or the anything else. The thing he hits it and it goes into the bushes. He doesn't go, oh, those stupid bushes. They jumped out and took my ball. He knows I hit it into the bushes. Right? If his car skids off the road, he knows he was driving too fast in the conditions. Right? The business fails, he knows I made a mistake. Right? But when he walks in the door at home, then he's unaware of what his wife's mood is. He thinks it should be this, but it's not, it's that. Just like you think the road should be perfectly smooth, no cars, no rain, and, you know, a truck that went by didn't, you know, drop some sand on the road. But the point is when you get to the corner, it's wet and there's sand and stuff, then you be careful, you'll slow down. Why? Because you're aware, right? The market changes. You adjust your business because you're aware. Right? You're doing anything. You're riding your bicycle. Anything changes. You're aware. You change it. But the man walks in the door to his house. He thinks his wife should be like this. And if she's not, then it's her fault. You understand? So simple. So simple. But, you know, we just don't accept it. No, because I want it to be like this. So what? If it went by one, everybody would be, you know, a billionaire. Everyone would be, you know, a model on the front of Vogue. You know, everyone would be, you know, it's just, you could go on and on and on with the list. Right? But it's not like that. You know how to work, you get a result. You don't know how to work, you get no result. So you don't apply these things into the situation, it won't work. Right? So that means the situation, the different elements, the relationships and all that, that is what has to be applied towards the goal. Does that make sense? You understand that, and that works. So in this, we see is that, any questions on this?
When cultivating new people, especially those kind of people who don't have much contact to our culture, and they basically just know you as a person, and you are basically always the one who starts the interaction, and then they respond positively, take books or prasadam or something like that, but they never take the first move.
They never take the first move. No. That means, what's your point?
So after contacting them, sometimes
Means you want to interact with someone else, but you don't know them so well, or they don't know you. Right? Is that what you're saying?
Then we know each other.
You know each other, but they don't interact first.
Yeah.
So therefore, if you want to interact with them, you act first. But as soon as you act, you always have to see if your action, what response it gets, what result it gets. Right? Does that make sense? So you contact them, and their response is positive, you continue in that way. If it's negative, you change how you deal it. You know what I'm saying? What you're saying, just like you're driving, you do something, and it starts to give a negative result, you change what you're doing. You figure out what are the options. You know what I'm saying? So that's not a problem. Point is if they only will respond, then that's fine. You take the first step. You know what I'm saying? But once you take the first step, you see how they respond. How they respond, then you do again. Then how they respond, you do. So that's how it works.
So as long as the response is positive, you can continue.
As long as the response is positive, then?
You can continue that I always do the first.
No, it's not a matter. It's a matter of if you deal and they don't respond well, you have to find a different way of dealing. If you need to interact with them. If you don't need to interact with them, then don't. Does that make sense? But if you do need to interact, then you find what works. You know, you try different things, talk in different ways, talk different subjects, different tones of voice, different kinds of language. Right? That makes sense.
Can you explain how to ascertain goals in the relationship?
How to ascertain goals in the relationship.
Like, I want others to behave accordingly to...
You want others to behave accordingly. Okay, you want others to behave in a certain way, but first you have to see is your relationship with them such that they should behave in that way. You're the brahmachari, you walked into the brahmachari ashram. You may want everybody to suddenly stand up and start cheering and whistling, you know, and jumping around and going Haribol, but that may not be actually the relationship. You know, you wash the pots, they're all the book distributors. It may not work that way. You know what I'm saying? And so it's a matter of, you have to know what is the relationship, so what can be there, right? Does that make sense? So you don't expect something that's not going to happen. You had a bad day, so you come back and you expect everyone's going to come up and go, oh, what happened, you know, this and that, work it all out for you. But it may not happen that way. That may not be the relationship you've cultivated. Do you do that with them? Do you have that kind of friendship that they're going to interact with you like that? Right? You know what I'm saying? It's one thing to expect, but it's another thing that you actually, that's the relationship. Does it make sense?
Maharaj, I have two questions, but in relationships between devotees, are they based on a pure spiritual relationship, or is there influence of one's material conditioning? And what if in relationships between devotees, the material conditioning or the previous interests before Krishna consciousness, they become dominating?
Okay, it means if someone means are the relationships between devotees pure? What do you mean by purely spiritual? What does that mean, purely spiritual?
It's not.
It's like just like Brahman. It's just like a light. You come into the room and this other light just gets bigger, like that. You know, something out of like Star Trek or like that.
But it's not based on one's material conditioning.
It's not based on one's material conditioning. So what would it be based on?
The fact that we are spiritual souls.
The fact that you are a spiritual soul. So how does one spirit soul interact with another spirit soul?
By serving Krishna.
By serving Krishna, what are you going to serve with?
With the material body.
With a material body, and that's created by? What's that created from? Matter, but why does the matter take that shape?
Because of one's previous activities.
One's previous activities, which are known as,
Karma.
and which are dependent upon one's,
Modes of nature.
which is indicative of one's
Conditioning.
Right? You know what I'm saying? That means you meet another devotee and you pat him on the back. What are you going to pat him on the back with? With a hand. And then there's a bat. How does that all work? Because that's all actually made out of the results of your conditioned nature. So how is that purely spiritual? Because purely spiritual is just, you know, 1/10,000th to the air, floating and communing through, I guess, telepathy or something, you know, out of some sci-fi book or something. You understand? The difficulty comes is because we're conditioned to thinking spiritual means nothing like the material. Right? Now, it's nothing like the material in its quality of mentality or the purity. But in form, it's going to be exactly the same. Right? Mother Yashoda wants to put on Krishna's chadar. Right? She's dressing him in the morning. What is she going to use? What will she use? Hands. Okay. Now, let us say you have a mother in the material world, devotee, but still in the material world. And as far as we know, not as specific a scheduled incarnation or something. So they are dealing with a body made out of earth, water, fire, air, and ether. Right? And their son is the same. Right? Not the same meaning in the impersonal sense that they're one, but means he's also made out of body out of the Mahabhutas. Right? Now, when she dresses him and she puts his chadar on, what is she going to use? Her hands. So this is the problem, because we don't connect that mothers in the spiritual world dress their kids with the same kind of concept as mothers in the material world dress. Why would it be the same? What's the simplest direct answer?
Because the principle of dressing is the same.
Principle of dressing, but you know, how does it come into the material world? It's a reflection, right? So the reflection is the same, right? You have a head, you look in the mirror, what kind of head will be there?
It's the same, but something is opposite.
Same, but something's opposite. Okay, so that's it. It's the perverted reflection. It's exactly the same concept, but the mentality is different. Mother Yashoda is trying to please Krishna, right? Who's God. The mother in the material world is trying to please herself or her kid. Where's God in it? That's the perversion. Reflection's the same. Right? Mother Yashoda worries about Krishna's food and his protection and health, that he's dressed nicely, that he goes to bed on time, that he gets up on time. The mother here does exactly the same thing. Does that make sense? So, when you define, therefore, now let's go back to your question. How do you define spiritual?
So it's based on the mood of pleasing Krishna.
Yes, that's it. If it's connected to Krishna, it's spiritual. It's not connected to Krishna, it's material. That's all. But the form between the two is the same. You understand? That must be understood. Otherwise, relationships can't be understood. That's why then it's that, okay, as a karmi, then, you know, as one of those, you know, stinky, smelly karmis, right? Then, you know, you meet somebody, you're nice to them. You say hello, you interact nicely and all that. You might shake their hand or whatever it is you're doing. You know, when you come into your house and other people are there, you'll, you know, say I'm here, say this and that, right? No? Like that. And, you know, because you're living in that house, you know, there's duties expected, you know, you keep it nice and clean, you keep your stuff nicely, you'll do service around the house, right? No? Yeah. But now, that's material life, right? Stinky, smelly, karmi, you know, funky, dirty, right? Now, when we become devotee, now it's spiritual, right? So now we don't do anything material. So when we meet people on the street, you know, and they say hi, we go, ooh, dirty karmi. And when we get into the house, then, you know, anybody talks, oh, that's all mundane emotion. And, you know, we keep our stuff however we like because we don't care about all these mundanities. Right? Isn't it? No, you don't do that. No one you know does that. No, pretty good. You have a nice temple here. Most everywhere else I know is whatever it was that they did materially, they don't do any of that. So they lose all their social ability because they think spiritual means that it can't be anything material in the way of form. But what is that concept? That's a Mayavad philosophy. Right? If there's emotion in the material world, spiritual must mean no emotion. Right? Does that make sense? It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. Does it make sense? Why didn't it make sense?
Because that's Mayavadi conception.
Yeah, it's Mayavadi conception, but the point is then we shouldn't have any problem in dealing with anything in the material world, because all that we change is now we do it for Krishna. Just like, let's say you have a car. Okay, it's your car. Would you take care of your car? Okay, now let us say it is Krishna's car. It belongs to the temple. Will we take care of it? Good. Because the one I watch drive by every day in front of my window that's full of devotees, the back is all rusted and everything's falling apart. And I guarantee if you go from temple to temple to temple, except for one or two temples, they're all falling apart. You go into the Brahmacharya ashram, it's falling apart. You go into the bathrooms and showers, falling apart. Anything to do with Krishna, it's falling apart, except the Didi room. And even that, it looks great this way. Ever gone into a Didi room and looked this way? You know, here, all this nice thing. Go inside and look this way. If it's good, that means that people know what they're doing. But most places, you'll find back there, it's a disaster. So what you look at is beautiful, what Krishna looks at is terrible. You know, except for, of course, the loving devotees. But the Didi room, from the Didi's perspective, is less than nice. Right? And what's the idea? You know, who's going to see it? God, but hey, he's only one guy, right? You know, you understand? So where does that come from? It comes from Mayavada philosophy, because we think material and spiritual are opposite. They're opposite in consciousness, and that you're conscious of God or not, but in activity they're the same. Does that make sense? So does that answer your question?
Yes. The second question was that if there are two devotees and they have some common background on the material existence, and that they may be like some certain sports or certain kind of music.
Like metal, for example. Just throwing out.
So if that becomes very prominent in their relationships.
If that becomes prominent in their relationship.
Yes, so...
If that becomes.
Yes, so is it then considered like a relationship, a spiritual relationship, or something mixed?
Oh, okay. So if they have a common point from before they were devotees of a material particular liking, and if their relationship is based on that, is it spiritual or material? So, according to your first question, how did we define spiritual?
That which is pleasing to Krishna.
Pleasing to Krishna, that which is connected to Krishna. So if that relationship, whatever that particular thing of the past is, if it's connected to Krishna, then is it spiritual or material?
If it's connected with Krishna, then it's spiritual.
If it's connected with Krishna, it's spiritual. Okay. So that,
It's not?
if it's not, it's not. It's that simple. Right? You just like to drive cars, it's material. You're driving the car nicely for Krishna, it's spiritual. You're doing the same thing. It's simply a change in context. That's what Prabhupada says, you know, the famous, that Brahma Samhita address, you know? And he's reading from the Brahma Samhita there, that